In Carrying Arms Chapter 12, the Mount Natagumo disaster, Rui hated it here. He hated the feeling of being summoned. That strange sensation as he was instantly warped to a location like no other. Here, gravity was different. Time was different. Even space itself was different. It was an odd reality, mangled and twisted, emanating from the mind of a single, stationary demon. Nakame. She was above them, seated. She held an ancient biwa tightly, ready to strum that piercing tune at a moment's notice, a tune that had haunted his mind since the moment he became a member of the 12 Kizuki. Again, he really hated this place. Especially now that upper moons were present. He could just feel it. Their contempt for anyone not in the higher ranks. Most of them didn't bother to look his way. Instead, they bickered amongst each other like petulant children. They were all bad news. Especially him. Doma. Everything about that monster screamed darkness. Not a blatant sort of darkness. But a peculiar, cruel, innocent sort of evil. Rui glanced to his right. He grimaced. Only 3 members of the lower ranks remained. Mukago was gone. Rokuro was gone. Kamano was gone. Most likely dead. But why? Never in his time in the 12 Kizuki had 3 members been killed on such short notice. Nearly 30 years as a demon, and he'd never seen this happen. While the lower 6 were always being replaced, it was never more than 1 at a time, and the master would summon them whenever one of them died. Something wasn't right. Upper 2 and Upper 3 continued their banter, up to the point that Kokushibo stepped in to quell the flames. Rui shivered as the strongest member spoke. A mystery, he was. This demon was not like them. Not in the slightest. For one, he used a sword, and his stance, his very presence, was reminiscent of a demon slayer. Kokushibo glanced around, catching Rui's gaze. Lower rank 5 froze in place. Those 6 eyes seemed to see right through him. Kokushibo moved on and looked upward. Everyone followed his keen gaze. Master Muzan. He was here now. Above them. Upside down. The king of demons was mixing chemicals in various beakers and test tubes. Not a drop was spilled, despite him defying the law of gravity. Silence reigned. Nakame strummed her biwa. Suddenly, all of them were standing in a line, from highest rank to lowest, with Rui being the last. He clenched his fists. It was humiliating, knowing that he was now considered the weakest member. Muzan didn't look at them as he spoke. Kneel. They did. Without hesitation. A distance away, Doma smirked. He raised his hand, as though he were in school. Master. If I may intrude. I have but a simple question. He glanced around, feigning shock. What happened to the lower moons? They seem a bit less numerous than usual. Rui almost hissed with anger. Of course that lunatic would bring it up. Doma knew what he was doing. Dead, Muzan stated. For some reason, he sounded tired. You're all, a disappointment. All of you. Everyone was quiet. Even the upper moons were stunned into silence. Where was this coming from? The 12 Kizuki has been in existence for half a millennium. And yet, the Demon Slayer Corps grows in number every passing day. The beaker in his hand shattered to pieces. That snake, Yabayashiki, has yet to be found. And the number 1 reason for your creation, the location of the blue spider lily, has not seen any headway since the first of you was turned. Muzan's eyes locked with Kokushibo's. I have no excuse, said the strongest member of the 12. Sorry, master, Domo lamented, rubbing at his beautiful hair. I'm the worst at detective work. Clearly, Muzan affirmed. He gathered the shards of shattered glass. Rui's eyes narrowed. Obviously, Muzan favored the upper moons. It was clear as day. If any of the lower ranks had spoken so casually to him, like Doma often did, they'd be a stain on the floor in an instant. Muzan finally turned to face them. I've allowed you the freedom to do as you please in pursuit of my plans. He appeared before them, fast as lightning. Faster than even Kokushabo. But maybe that was the incorrect decision. Crimson eyes bore into Rui's soul. The master was now in front of them, in front of the last remaining members of the lower moons. Let me be plain to you three. In response to your colleagues' deaths, I was going to kill you. Every last one of you. I was going to disband the lower moons permanently. A wave of foreboding overcame Rui, yet he didn't let it show. Beside him, Wakaraba was shaking, eyes darting about in panic. Further away, Inmyu was shuddering with anticipation. The sick bastard. This was it, then, Rui mused. Death was certain. In moments, their lives would cease to be. Everything Rui had worked to build would vanish in an instant. With a wave of Muzan's hand, his dream of creating a family would come to an end. However, the master began. I've since realized something. Rui looked up swiftly, heart racing. Your weakness, all your failures, are a direct reflection of me. Shock rippled through the gathered demons. Daki sprang to her feet, frowning deeply. She stepped out of line, almost to the point of tears. Master Muzan, she cried. Please, please, don't say such things. The failures of those weaklings can't possibly be your fault, Daki. His voice chilled her to the bone. A cool, controlled anger engulfed his features. Do not speak out of turn and twist my words. That was not what I said, nor was it what I meant. Now. Be quiet. No more interruptions. My apologies, master, she sulked, kneeling down. Muzan continued. To simply kill you would be acknowledging that creating the 12 Kazuki was a mistake. That cool rage burned in the master's eyes. I don't make mistakes. Everything I do is perfect. Every plan I make succeeds. Every goal of mine will be accomplished no matter what. Rui stood there, stunned. Something wasn't right. This was so unlike the master. As strange as it sounded, it would be more in character for him to kill them here and now than give them a second chance. What happened? Did something spook him? From this moment on, I will oversee your activities personally, Muzan revealed. I've given you far too much freedom, and perhaps, that is why you fail. Silence reigned. Muzan clasped his hands behind his back. Several demons have slipped from my grasp in recent times, he explained. 3, to be exact. At that, memories flowed into Rui's mind, emanating from Muzan himself. Images filled those assembled, and they could all see the demons in question. A girl with a bamboo muzzle. A male with short hair and eyes on his hands. And a female with raven black hair, tinted orange at the tips. Doma chuckled. Oh, it's you, he whispered excitedly, seemingly recognizing one of the three. If you encounter one of them, bring them directly to me for studying, the master instructed. Another memory flowed into their minds. And 3 more people, humans, this time flashed before Rui's eyes. First was a demon slayer with a butterfly-patterned haori, next was another demon slayer with Hanafuda earrings, and finally, there was a blonde male with whiskered cheeks. Kill these 3 if you ever encounter them. Particularly the boy with Hanafuda earrings. The master's orders were clear, simple. Yet Rui couldn't help but wonder why these 6 held so much significance. Though, in truth, demon slipping from Muzan's hold was almost unheard of, with only Tamayo the fugitive being the first. However, considering the sheer volume of demons in Japan, it was only logical to conclude that some would, in fact, have a rebellious inclination. But why were 3 humans mentioned as well? Did they have something to do with the deaths of 3 lower moons? What on earth was happening? Before Rui could react, something stabbed him in the neck. It was a tentacle-like whip. The appendage had emerged from Muzin's back and lodged itself in Rui's throat. An instant later, he could feel something warm being injected into his body. Something that felt incredible. It was the master's blood. Rui froze, feeling waves of pleasure as Muzin's essence flooded his veins. Not only him, but Inmu and Wakaraba. They'd been injected as well and were receiving a moderate amount of Muzin's blood. Rui tried to hold on to the feeling, tried to store the memory of this experience in his mind. But just as soon as it began, the process was over. Somewhere along the line, he'd passed out. He was sprawled out on the floor, shuddering as the pleasure subsided. Rui picked himself up and was shocked to feel power flowing through him. He was stronger now. He could feel it. Still, apprehension gnawed at his stomach. The master never gave his blood so freely. Was there something Muzin wasn't telling them, something that was pushing him to take such drastic measures? Rui stiffened. Muzin locked eyes with him. Akaza, Doma, Wakaraba, Muzin stated. You will accompany Rui back to Mount Natagumo. Akaza froze, fists clenching. Respectfully, if I may inquire, Master, Upper 3 began, bowing his head. Is there a reason for this? To cause chaos, of course. Muzin spared them a glance. Like rats, the Demon Slayer Corps has grown too numerous. Their infestation runs deep, spreading across Japan like a plague. And thus, I am implementing a new strategy to whittle them down until this thorn in my side is erased for good. The master began walking away. This is phase 1 of my plan. Simply kill them. Kill as many insects as you can. That is all. I'll be watching closely. The rest of you are dismissed. Nakame strummed her biwa, and Muzin was gone, leaving the remaining members of the 12 behind. Rui's pounding heart slowed when Muzin was no longer there. Domo laughed happily. Looks like we'll be working together, Lord Akaza. Upper 3 scowled, seething with rage. Rui remained still. He tried to process what had just happened. Was no one concerned? Something was clearly wrong, judging by Muzin's actions. Yet the upper moons were unfazed, behaving in their usual manner. Doma went to greet Daki. If Rui recalled correctly, the only remaining female member of the 12 had been turned by Upper Moon too. They spoke like old friends, with Daki giggling, while Kokushibo went to talk to Nakame. Rui glanced at Wakaraba. Lower Moon 3 was shuddering with fear. Inmu, as usual, was staring into space, a blush tinting his cheeks. However, he did seem saddened that Muzin hadn't included him in the assignment as well. Finally, after several minutes, Nakame strummed her biwa. Nearly everyone disappeared, save for the 4 of them. Doma clapped his hands. Well, team. Let's get started. Since I'm the highest ranked, you all have to listen to whatever I say. Fuck off, Akaza spat. Doma chuckled in return, and the air suddenly grew cold. Not in a metaphorical sense, either. A heavy chill tingled through Rui. The temperature had dropped to such a degree that it was painful, like fire burning his flesh. Ice came to life around them, freezing the wooden floor beneath their feet. Frost began forming on Rui's skin. Glinting icicles, over 3 meters in length, began to materialize, rising from the ground, as deadly as they were beautiful. This was Doma's blood demon art, one of the most versatile of the 12 Kizuki. Rui frowned. Even with the blood Muzin had provided, he still was no match for the upper moons, that much was clear. Akaza and Doma stared each other down. One, with gaze narrowed and fists clenched. The other, with an innocent smile and glowing, rainbow-colored eyes. Rui wondered if they were truly about to fight, despite the warning Kokushibo had given them. In the end, Akaza turned away. The tension eased. He crossed his arms and walked off. Now, Then, Doma said brightly, turning to Rui and Wakaraba. Where were we? Tokyo, Naruto's clinic. Yahaba held out his arm so that Naruto could paint those strange symbols on his skin. It was nighttime, and they were in the basement. Despite the time, the clinic was lively. From across the hall, he could hear the voices of several. Mainly, Susumaru's, Tamayo's, and the human boy that lived here as well. There was laughing, chatting. Susumaru's voice, her laugh, was the most distinct. He listened closely. Heard that obnoxious sound, a high-pitched giggle that never ceased to annoy him when they were together. No matter the circumstance, no matter the assignment, she'd been there with him, aggravating him all their years together. He shook his head with a small smile. Yahaba never thought he'd be glad to hear that laugh. Once a mild irritant, the happiness in her voice was like music to his ears. The demon glanced down. He was seated on the floor, legs crossed and shirtless. Beside him, Naruto was hard at work. A container of ink was next to the blonde, and with a thick brush, he drew intricate runes from Yahaba's shoulder to his palms, then to his fingertips. Every inch of his arms would soon be covered, rendering his blood demon art unusable. At least, that was the plan. Yahaba was still skeptical, however. In his mind, a human, without a demon's power, couldn't possibly achieve such a feat, but he kept his mouth shut, going along with Susumaru's demands for the sake of peace with his friend. If this succeeded, then he wouldn't have access to his lower eyes. He'd still retain the physical strength and regeneration of a typical demon, but he'd be powerless against strong demons like Tamayo and Yashiro. Essentially, if he tried to run away, if he tried to contact someone, they could easily stop, restrain him, and keep him locked away. Well, it wasn't like he was going to attempt an escape. He'd been soundly beaten. He'd accepted their terms, and he'd be foolish to make any contrary moves. So, this will really prevent me from opening my eyes, he inquired, trying to break the ice between him and the blonde. They hadn't really talked since he first came here a day ago. Yet, he wanted to. He wanted to talk, wanted to know who this man was. And why he was so special. Naruto's blood had done something in him. He wasn't sure what, though. If one thing was certain, it was the fact that his connection to Kibutsuji was weaker. So much so, that he could hardly feel the ancient demon. Before his encounter with Naruto, that man's presence had been constant, like someone was always watching him from behind. Now, however, there was interference. He no longer felt as though he was being watched. His will to leave Muzan behind quelled the turmoil within him. And only peace remained. He glanced at Naruto, heart pounding. He wanted more blood from him. Yet this wasn't a ravenous hunger as things had been before. Only a strong desire for that which had helped open his eyes to a new world, a new path forward. Having second thoughts, Naruto finally spoke, pausing mid-brush stroke. No. Yahaba shook his head. I just find it hard to believe. The blonde smiled gently. That a human can do such things. Yes, he replied. Naruto continued painting. The brush's soft edge felt comforting, and he let himself relax. Do you think? Yahaba paused, trying to phrase the question correctly. Do you think I can really change? Naruto didn't look up, but that gentle smile was still there. I think you can do anything you truly desire to do, he supplied. Just like your friend. I'm not like her, though, Yahaba supplied. Susumaru's always been an innocent soul. Not to say that she wasn't aware of what she was doing, but unlike me, I don't believe she chose to become a demon. I was young when I was turned stupid, naive, sure, yet I alone chose to become this. Yahaba told him everything. The story of his life. Being poor. Being blind. Being forced to work and support his mother. Being fired. Being given the promise of sight. And how he killed his own mother. He didn't know why, but he felt like he could tell Naruto anything. There was no look of revulsion in his gaze. Only attentiveness and genuine interest in his story. No one, save for his mother, had ever paid such attention to him. His eyes were glistening when he finished. He blinked away the tears, embarrassed by such a display of weakness. Naruto didn't care. Not even a little. You were coerced, he explained simply. A blind child being offered sight in his darkest, most difficult hour. Of course you took the opportunity. You didn't know better. You were desperate. Alone. And ignorant. Yahaba looked down. I've killed many people, innocent people. I never said you didn't do wrong. You definitely did. Naruto added the finishing touches to the seal. However, you can't change the past. You can only change the future, and yourself. His words cut deep, like a knife. To wallow in self-pity would be a waste, even more so than dying. With the time he had on Earth, he had to do something. Anything. Anything to put the souls of those he'd snuffed out at rest. For his mother's sake. He didn't mind if he was never forgiven. He'd gladly accept any punishment in the afterlife. The hope he'd experienced last night returned, and Yahaba felt that now, he could, in fact, do some good from this point onward. Susumaru's laugh reached them once more. Yahaba saw the smile curling on Naruto's face. And he knew. He knew just how much the blonde cared of her. How did you meet Susumaru? Yahaba asked. Naruto grinned. In a completely random encounter. I can't say I'm surprised. He laughed softly. Naruto placed a hand on his shoulder, preparations finished. Are you ready? Yahaba nodded firmly. Naruto activated the seal, and the process was so draining that Yahaba passed out. In his stupor, he vaguely remembered Naruto carrying him down the hall, putting him in a bed, and letting him sleep. It seemed like a dream, but it was one of the most peaceful moments of his life. That's right, he thought. I'm sorry about your gait. He mumbled sleepily. Naruto chuckled. Apology accepted. But you're still going to help fix it? It's come a long way. Yeah. You should be proud. I should, huh? Yes. Naruto stood with his arms crossed. The room was dimly lit, covered with seals, patterns so complex that even he was shocked by its intricacy. How? How did he create something like this? Not long ago, he'd been considered an idiot, partly due to his laziness, as well as his poor upbringing. Worse still was the fact that he'd internalized these descriptions of himself, words like dead last, knucklehead, moron. They'd become his identity, became who he was, an armor to protect himself from the world. At least, until he became part of Team 7. Then he met Jiraiya, then Tsunade, and then learned from Sakura. Yahaba had asked him if it was possible to change. Naruto was the greatest believer in change, especially in people in oneself. He was a prime example, after all. From failure to success. So, perhaps Kurama was right. It was fine to take pride in your accomplishments. It was okay to feel good about yourself when you succeeded or reached a new milestone. Naruto moved closer. His clones were still in a circular formation, adding chakra to a rip in the fabric of space. This thing, this portal, had grown, taking on a more geometric shape, akin to Kagaya's own teleportation technique, but slightly different. Carefully, he reached out, intent on putting a hand through to his world. He couldn't. Yes, his palm was physically against the portal, but it was like touching glass, a window without an entrance. He couldn't enter the other side just yet. However, he could see through it. He could see his home. Naruto took a breath and looked closer. Shit. Naruto's eyes narrowed to slits. Are you seeing this, Kurama? Yeah, sorry, kid. At Kurama's words, Naruto's fists clenched. He gritted his teeth, and the rage he felt was indescribable, unlike anything he'd felt in recent years. Few things in life had made him lose control. And they all involved the deaths of those he loved. I'm going to kill him. His words were soft, silent, yet deadlier than any weapon. The portal was showing something. It was showing him what was most on his mind at the moment. As he peered through time and space, Naruto saw an image that chilled him to the bone. There were 6 people. 6 familiar people. They were standing still, like statues. All 6 of them possessed a Rain Sharingan, as well as an eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan. Like Nagato's 6 paths, each of them was studded with black rods. Black chakra receivers that pierced various portions of their bodies. From their heads to their toes. Finally, the worst part of it was that they were dead. All of them. Soulless eyes peered forward. The telltale signs of the Edo Tensei were clear as well. Oniki, Mei, Agara, Tsunade, and Kakashi. Naruto's rage intensified, then a deep sadness rose in his chest. These were Sasuke's pawns, his 6 paths. He'd killed all the Kage. And now, he was using them to spread terror across the great nations. He must have undone the infinite Tsukuyomi. All Sasuke needed were the 9 Biju and a Rain Sharingan to do it. Unfortunately, he had both. A heavy weight settled on Naruto's shoulders. His next battle with Sasuke would involve fighting the Kage, fighting Gaara, Tsunade, and Kakashi in particular. It was a lot to take in, a lot to process. Unbidden, doubts crept into his mind. He wondered. Was he strong enough to do it? Not just physically, but mentally. Could he fight his friend, his mentors, without falling to pieces? Can I really do this? With the Biju and Kage, Sasuke was more powerful than ever. You can. And you will. Naruto looked away from the portal. Kurama's encouragement sounded distant as the reality of his situation settled like a rock in a lake. Listen to me, Naruto. He listened. You won't lose. You've grown stronger. Stronger than you can even comprehend, the fox stated. You're presently undertaking one of greatest chakra control exercises in history. What you've done, what we've done feeding untold of amounts of energy into this portal, without rest, at a constant rate for over a year has not only grown our reverses, but also given us a control, a mastery, over chakra that will never be matched by Sasuke. Your sealing jutsu has gotten better. Your medical ninjutsu has improved as well. You have so much in your arsenal. Don't second guess yourself. Slowly, but surely, Kurama's words drove the apprehension away. When you finally stop holding back, when you use everything you have, you'll find your power is boundless. Thanks, Kurama, he said with a soft smile. I needed that. Anytime. You trust me? Without question. When this is all over, I'll figure out a way to let you roam freely. So that you're not stuck in my body all the time. Only a chuckle echoed in return. Kurama was right. Naruto still had a chance against Sasuke, despite his perceived disadvantages. In their first battle, he had been on the defensive side, fighting without the intent to kill. And despite Sasuke having all the Biju, they'd still been evenly matched. In their next battle, all bets were off, and Naruto was going for the kill. For now, though, until the portal was complete, he would focus on Yuichiro's reunion with his younger brother. He couldn't let doubt cloud his mind, couldn't let sadness overwhelm him, not when his presence was still needed in this world. He'd lost so many people in the war, and he'd learned to keep his grief at bay. He'd mourn the Kage in time. Sao hated herself. It was a deep dislike that had been there since she was a child. Since she ruined the life of her gentle giant, her beloved Jime. She went to sleep with remorse, then awoke with remorse. At 17 years of age, it had been years since the incident. Years since an innocent man was thrown in prison because of her foolishness. "Are you listening, Seo?" Naruto's voice dragged her back to reality. She was in a room, seated at the edge of her hospital bed. She was dressed and ready to return home. The blonde doctor was performing one last assessment before he discharged her. He was very thorough, asking her questions, observing her response to various tests. He did all this with a patience and gentleness that reminded her of Jilmei. All her life, she'd been shown nothing but kindness. By her first family, by Jilmei, by her adoptive family, and now, by Naruto. She didn't deserve it. Everything she needed for the trip back to her parents' house was ready. Soon, she would be on her way home, covered in new scars, healed injuries that would be with her forever. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Tears brimmed in her eyes. And the more she wiped them away, the harder and faster they fell. Naruto, alarmed, stopped his assessment. He kneeled in front of her, made himself smaller, so that she could feel safe. "Did I do something?" She shook her head. "Are you still in pain?" She shook her head again. "Do you want me to leave you alone for a bit?" Once more, she shook her head. Naruto's features softened. He sat down next to her. "Okay, then I'll stay right here." In time, she stopped crying. Seo dried her eyes with a cloth Naruto had provided. They sat in silence until she was ready to talk. "Sorry, I don't mean to waste your time. I know you're very busy." Naruto shook his head. "Don't worry about that. You've been through a lot these past few weeks. Being attacked by demons isn't something most people can just shrug off. And your injuries were the worst, too." She looked down, fingers knotting in her lap. "It wouldn't be the first time." Seo whispered it, but Naruto heard her clearly. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Besides my adoptive parents, I've never told anyone about this." She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "I think it's time that I do." Naruto rested a hand on her shoulder. "Take your time." She did, gathering the strength to tell him. "Where to start? I lost my biological parents at a young age, when I was 4. Seo looked down. "Since that day, I thought I'd be alone forever. But I was wrong. I found a new family, comprised of other orphans like me. The oldest, his name was Jilmei." Her eyes lit up as she remembered him. Towering. Strong. Reliable. And oh, so kind. He wasn't much older than us, and he was blind, but he took care of us, took care of me. He cooked for us, made sure we were warm, made sure we had a roof over our heads. Her hands clenched. Naruto listened intently. She was glad he did. "We lived like this for a while," she continued. "Those were good times. I'd never been happier. Food every day. Clothes on our backs. There was so much love in our little home." She swallowed. Then one day, we were attacked. "By a demon?" Naruto inquired softly. Seo nodded slowly, flinching at the memory. "I don't remember much. Only that someone broke in and killed all of them, my family. Jilmei urged them not to run. Most of them did. I don't blame them. We were children, scared, impulsive. I don't know why, but I listened to him. I closed my eyes and stayed behind Jilmei. He protected me. He fought that demon until the sun rose. He was incredible." She was shaking again, and Naruto's hand on her shoulder grew firm, calming. "I was such an idiot," Seo whispered. "I was so scared. When the authorities arrived at the scene, I did my best to describe the incident." She sighed. "They mistook my description of the demon for Jilmei. Because of me, they thought he was the one who murdered 8 children. She laughed bitterly. I didn't realize this until weeks later. I thought Yomei had been taken to a hospital to be treated. Little did I know he'd been taken somewhere far away and put in prison. It seemed her story had touched Naruto, because he was still listening with rapt attention. I tried to explain myself better, but it was too late. Instead of listening to me and conducting a more thorough investigation, the police went with the original, more convenient story. A demon vanishing into thin air when the sun rose. Who would believe such a thing, she lamented. And so, time went on. I was adopted again, and I've been living in Tokyo for a long time now. I've been trying to find him, trying to discover what become of Jilmei. Sorry, I'm talking too much. Naruto shook his head. No, no. It's fine. He put down a stethoscope. Tell me. Have you found out anything about him? Seo nodded slowly, beautiful black locks framing her face. I think so. She reached into her belongings and pulled out a large book, something she'd been carrying that night of the Lower Moon's attack. See, I aim to be a journalist in the future. For years now, I've been collecting reports, sightings, and rumors of demon attacks. She opened the book, and Naruto's eyes widened at how detailed it was. Yeah, I can definitely see you being a journalist, he commented. She smiled a bit. Seo flipped through the book. Of all the newspaper clippings and eyewitness accounts of demons, I noticed a certain pattern. In many cases, swordsmen would also be present. Demon slayers. They're thought to be deranged individuals by most civilians, an organization not sanctioned by the government. But there's no question that demons do exist, and that these warriors aren't just oddballs running around with swords. Her eyes burned with hope. That boy from yesterday. He was a demon slayer, wasn't he? At Naruto's nod, she continued. Then you're well acquainted with their organization. The blonde rubbed his hair sheepishly. Yeah, sort of. In that case, I have one request. Just one. Seo dug into her bag once more. She pulled out an envelope. It was addressed to one Jilmei Jima. I wrote this down years ago, and I've been waiting for the opportunity for it to reach him. Naruto tilted his head. What are you getting at? She smiled. Jilmei is a demon slayer. In many of the stories I compiled, one person stood out most to me. Eyewitness testimony, even pictures, of a giant man saving people kept cropping up. Seo was bubbling with anticipation. The tears were gone. Now replaced by joy. And I know it's him. It has to be. It's Jilmei. Even after all these years, he's still saving people. Like he once saved me. Naruto hummed. So, you want me to take this letter to him? She sat up. If you can. Those sea blue eyes softened. He took the letter. Held it close. I don't know Jilmei Jima personally, but I'll pass this on to a member of the Demon Slayer Corps, someone I trust. A bright smile etched across her features. Thank you. Thank you, Naruto. He stood from the bed and tousled her hair. No problem, Seo. She must be the unluckiest and luckiest person in the world. To be attacked by demons twice was one thing, but to survive both times was another. And after so many years, her letter of apology would reach him. Her savior. Her Jilmei. Seo left in the afternoon. She hugged Naruto tightly and thanked him once more. Thanked him for taking care of her. For pulling her from the brink of death. And for taking her letter without question. She was gone after that, headed back to her parents' home in Shibuya. Naruto wondered, watching her retreating form, did she even realize that there were several demons living under his roof? He shrugged. It didn't matter. She hadn't asked any questions, or seemed uncomfortable during her stay here, so he brushed it aside and deemed it irrelevant. The next few days were peaceful. He tried to keep the cage and Sasuke out of his mind as he went about his day. Having Tamayo around was a welcome change. It was like before, when he'd first arrived in Tokyo, when he'd lived with her and Yashiro. Her presence was so warm and inviting, and Naruto wondered if this was what having a mother was like. She was nurturing, stern, and would remind him to go to bed on time, especially when he worked on a seal late into the night. "It's for Susumaru," he'd argued. Tamayo crossed her arms. "But you still need to sleep." Her gentle smile and well-meaning words convinced him to actually take it easy for once. Yashiro and Yuichiro hit it off great. They already knew each other, but proximity strengthened their friendship. Yahaba had a talk with Tamayo at one point. Naruto didn't listen in on the conversation, neither did he desire to. Whatever happened was between them, and them alone. And of course, as promised, Yahaba fixed Naruto's gate mostly by himself as the blonde relaxed in the garden and watched, talked to Susumaru, and gazed at the night sky. "You missed a piece," Susumaru pointed out, gesturing to a metal part of the gate that had come undone. She snickered as Yahaba seated. "And there's another one there. And another one right behind you. Damn, Yahaba, you really can't see without those fancy hand eyeball thingies on your palms, can you?" "Hand eyeball thingies?" Naruto echoed, laughing. Susumaru shrugged with a grin. "Sounds about right." Naruto thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, it actually does." Yahaba wanted to protest the improper name of his technique but refrained from doing so. He accepted his punishment with honor and finished the task. Then he proceeded to clean the entire clinic. To Naruto's surprise, the place looked better than ever. Spotless by all accounts. "He's like that," Susumaru commented. "Always about cleanliness. It's super annoying at times." "Well, I can't say I hate it," Naruto marveled, crossing his arms. The clinic was lively, and things were uneventful, until Shinobu's crow finally arrived. Along with her crow, a pair of demon slayers came as well. 2 women. One was tall, almost 2 inches taller than Naruto. The other was of average height, with ruby-red eyes that seemed to glow in the early morning sunday. "Are you Naruto Uzumaki?" the tall demon slayer inquired. Having just returned from the market, Naruto and Yuichiro placed their supplies at the front door. "Yep, that's me," he said lazily, giving them a once-over. "And you are?" "Asami," the taller woman greeted, bowing. Her purple Nichiren blade glinted dimly. She was a beautiful woman, with long brown hair, green eyes, and angular features. A small scar ran from her jaw to her neck. She gestured to her red-eyed partner. "This is Kei. As a side note, she's deaf." Kei dipped her head in a silent greeting. Naruto shook their hands. "It's a pleasure to meet you." After meeting so many of them, he was really starting to develop a fondness for demon slayers. "I'm assuming Shinobu sent you." Asami nodded. "Yes, Lady Coco and the Master. We're here to escort you and Mr. Tokaido to Demon Slayer headquarters." Her eyes flickered to Yuichiro, lingering. "I'm a Kino, the highest rank in the Corps, just under Hashira. As such, I will do everything in my power to make this a safe and pleasant trip for both of you." Kei nodded firmly. She used sign language, telling Asami something. Kei also feels the same. "We're here to serve. But please, I implore you, heed our concerns and suggestions as we travel," Asami explained. "There are certain rules to follow when going to headquarters. For one, our base is located in a secret location. Non-members aren't allowed to know the way there. As such, halfway through the journey, we will blindfold both of you and carry you the rest of the way. Is that okay?" Naruto shrugged. "Fine by me." "That's okay," Yuichiro said quietly. He was becoming nervous again, no doubt due to the thought of meeting his brother. "Good." Asami smiled. Are you packed and ready to go? Yeah, Naruto answered. We'll leave at noon then, the tall woman said. The trip should take 3 days on foot. We'll stop by a small town outside Tokyo to rest. We'll move during the day and rest when needed. Sounds like a plan, Naruto said. He grinned. Would you like something to eat before we leave? Asami signed to Kei, and the Death Slayer nodded enthusiastically. If it's okay, then we'd be happy to. Great. Come on in. Yui will get you something while I gather our things. He ushered them inside. They followed, then went with Yuichiro to the kitchen. Shinobu's Kajigai crow, arrayed in a butterfly trinket, having finished its work, took to the skies once more. Naruto made his way to the basement. There were 6 rooms. The largest housed his Fuinjutsu project. The others were Tamayo's room, Yashiro's, Yahaba's, Susumaru's, and a place for the recently turned man and his wife. Kimiko suddenly brushed up against him, purring. Naruto smiled warmly. He picked up his beautiful she-cat and stroked her black fur. She purred the more as he held her, snuggling against his chest. I'm so glad I found you, Naruto whispered. He recalled the day he adopted Kimiko. She'd been a stray kitten, abandoned outside of Tokyo. Starving, alone, she came to him on a cold, winter night. She was one of the reasons he remained sane when he first came to this world, when he was still trying to figure out what to do. And he loved her dearly. First, he stopped by Tamayo's room. Hearing his knock, she opened the door. She'd been awake, despite the time of day, writing at desk he'd provided for her. Naruto, she said gently, wrote a few more words, before turning her attention to him. Did you need something? Holding Kimiko close, he shook his head. No, I just wanted to stop by before I left. She sat up from her chair. So it's time. Naruto nodded. 2 demon slayers just arrived to escort me to their headquarters. I'll be going soon. Tamayo smiled warmly. Take care, then. I promise to look after your clinic. Everything will remain as you left it? Thank you. Naruto smiled. For a moment, Tamayo hesitated. Yahaba. She began. He's agreed to have me use his body in my experiments. I see. Naruto nodded. Then you're close to a breakthrough. I pray, she said. Only time will tell. Creating a drug to turn demons back into humans isn't easy, after all. He chuckled. If it's you, I'm sure you'll find a way. It seemed as though she wanted to tell him something else, something important. In the end, she refrained from doing so. Instead, she hugged him, held him, like she often did, and bid him farewell. Over the past few days, since Tamayo first arrived, Naruto had been giving large amounts of blood, storing it in special containers in anticipation for his departure. That way, Tamayo, Yashiro, Yahaba, and the recently turned man, would be fine without him being present. Using a special preservation seal, his blood could be stored for up to several weeks without issue. Paired with a refrigerator, it could last for months. He said goodbye to Yashiro, who was holding Chachimaru much like he was holding Kimiko. He stopped by Yahaba's room, gave him some blood, and reaffirmed their agreement. Finally, he arrived at Susumaru's room. He knocked. She quickly opened the door. Just seeing her was enough to make him relax. She became more beautiful with every passing day. His eyes lingered on her. Those enchanting eyes, burning like molten gold. Those perfect features. Those dangerously enticing canines. And her hair, it was one of his favorite things about her. So unique and alluring that he just wanted to reach out and touch it, wanted to run his fingers through her beautiful locks. She was looking at him as well, eyes full of desire. Whether that was a desire for his blood, or something else, he could not tell. It's time to leave, Naruto told her, Smiling. Ready? She beamed. Of course. Fuck, it's been so long since I've been outside the city. I can't wait. Despite the fact that she would be going to Demon Slayer headquarters, Susumaru was positively giddy with excitement. Su. He began. Are you sure about this? You don't have to go. I mean, this is the most dangerous place in the world for demons. It might not be a great experience. Susumaru shrugged, then smirked. I'll be with you. So, I'm not worried. Besides, I'm sure I can kick most demon slayers' asses at this point. Especially now that you've been teaching me some taijutsu. He chuckled. I suppose you can. And don't forget. I still gotta beat Shinobu at Shoki, or she'll rub it in my face forever and think I'm a quitter. Oh. Naruto grinned. You're that worried about what she thinks. Susumaru flushed, turning away. No, I don't care what that tiny woman thinks of me. Well, if you say so. Naruto chuckled. He put Kimiko down and pulled out a scroll. He knelt in front of Susumaru and unraveled it. Upon the scroll was a seal, a storage seal, modified to contain larger cargo. He glanced up at her. Here's the final product. It shouldn't feel as strange as the first time. She shrugged again. The first time wasn't bad, not really. Just weird. But I got used to it. In essence, she was to be sealed in this scroll so he could travel in the day without worrying about her being in the sun. It was also to keep her hidden from the two demon slayers that would be escorting them, as stipulated in letter Shinobu had sent. It just feels like I'm floating, Susumaru continued. She pulled on her orange haori, then grabbed a book. It's pretty dark, but I can still see myself, or any books I happen to have. Kind of fun, actually. They tested it already and concluded that it was safe. Susumaru didn't need air, didn't need food, didn't need water, to survive. Thus, she could be placed into a storage seal for extended periods of time without any problems. Okay, step on the scroll, Naruto instructed. She did. Even then, she was still a bit off-center. So he held her gently by the shoulders and moved her into place. Their eyes locked. Susumaru stiffened, then swallowed. She stared at him, his hands still against her shoulders. She felt slightly cold, as all demons did, and the urge to hold her in his arms grew stronger than ever. I'll see you soon, he said softly, finally letting her go. Why yeah, she whispered. He sealed her with a single hand sign. Naruto picked up the scroll and put it somewhere safe as he gathered his and Yuichiro's things. They packed light, bringing only essential supplies and clothes. Susumaru had been right. It seemed like ages since they'd left the city. And in spite of everything that was happening, namely the situation with Sasuke, Naruto felt calm, reassured. He even felt a jolt of anticipation. Not only was he helping Yuichiro reunite with his brother, but he was also going to see her Shinobu. One of few people who truly understood him at his core, and him her. If he were truly honest with himself, he really wanted to meet her again. Wanted to have their talks on the roof. Their time spent gazing at the stars above. Their time spent debating the efficacy of certain medical practices and procedures. Naruto wondered if she felt the same. Finally, he put his bag on, carrying Yuichiro's with another hand. Kimiko was perched on his shoulder, tail wrapped around his neck. He wore something simple, black pants, his usual black sandals, an orange shirt, and a dark jacket, foreign attire to the Japanese people, but normal to him. At noon, they left for Demon Slayer headquarters. In carrying arms something happened. Something bad. Something horrible. For several days, Demon Slayers had gone missing on Mount Natagumo. It was strange. Too strange. Messages had been sent from within the mountain, pleading for reinforcements. Kazhigai crows flew with a purpose at first, escaping the area, spreading the news as best they could. Each time a crow brought reinforcements, the new arrivals would meet the same fate. They would not return. No one seemed to ever return. Not even the crows. It was a positive feedback loop. When a group ascended the mountain, invariably, they requested for aid. Help would come, and in turn, send for even more help. It was never ending. And well over 50 demon slayers, in the span of several days, had not returned. This wasn't for a lack of trying, either. Many attempted to escape the horror of Natagumo. In the face of death, dozens attempted to flee. Tried to send more urgent messages. Yet, they couldn't. Because something was wrong with the mountain. Something that was affecting both human and animal alike. Ozaki could tell. There was a smell in the air, like sulfur. Not only that, but a thick, white mist covered everything in sight. She hardly saw a few feet in front of her. The mist moved and swirled around, rising beyond even this ancient mountain. No matter how hard she swung her blade, the fog did not dissipate. In fact, it seemed to grow stronger, slithering through the air as though it were alive. A fist burst through the mist. She brought her sword up and deflected the strike. Ozaki gritted her teeth. The blow was heavy. Enough to chip her blade. Her assailant glistened like silver, sleek body made of ice. It was bizarre, but not unexpected. Demons had an array of powers and abilities she no longer felt the need to anticipate. Only act. Only do. That was her new motto since facing the lower moons, since fighting alongside Naruto Uzumaki. She ducked under another blow, bringing her katana in a horizontal slash. She cleaved the head from the ice figure's body. Shaped like a man, its manufactured skull fell to the ground. Yet the mysterious being kept moving. Headless, it sent a kick her way. The force and speed of the kick was so great that she was sure it would shatter her ribs if it made contact. Again, she dodged, sidestepping the attack. She cut the ice figure into 20 fine pieces. That way, it was completely immobile. The being collapsed in a heap, chunks of ice spraying the grass. Ozaki panted and returned to the safety of their tree. As she drew near, the mist lessened slightly, and she could see its towering trunk. Around the great oak were 20 demon slayers. Most of them were injured, taking shelter beneath the large branches that spread through the air. Fear was the first word that came to mind. They were all afraid, wounded, and tired. Men and women of the corps sat at the base of the tree, hands shaking, teeth chattering with cold and terror. The hope of rescue had left their eyes, and it seemed as though most of them were only waiting to die. Gripping her sword, Ozaki drew close and crouched in front of someone. "Hiroshi," she tried. "I went as far as I could, but the mist only gets thicker, no matter where you go." "Of course, it does," Hiroshi lamented. The older demon slayer, who seemed in his mid-20s, barely moved. He stared at the mist, shivering, trembling. "Has the search party come back?" Ozaki asked. Her mind drifted to Murata. She prayed he was safe. No. Her heart sank, but she kept her composure. Her experiences in Tokyo had taught her that unnecessary worrying did no good, only made you sloppy, unrefined, and prone to mistakes. She leaned closer. "Do we have a plan?" As the highest ranked among them, it was Hiroshi's duty, his responsibility, to lead them. Yet he seemed to have lost all hope, eyes blank. Defeated. "We're going to die," he murmured. "All of us." "Don't say that," Ozaki implored, a hand on his shoulder. "If we work together, I'm sure we can." He shrugged Ozaki away. Continued staring. "Just because you survived contact with 312 Kazuki doesn't make you better than me," Hiroshi hissed. "I'm still a higher rank. I have more experience." I don't need your advice. He didn't talk to her again. Instead, suddenly, he stood up. A smile curled across his features. Tears brimmed in his eyes. He dropped his sword and began walking toward the mist. Ozaki tried to stop him, but he kept going, elbowing her until she let him go. He held his arms out, as if to greet someone. Something was wrong. Ozaki looked forward, but she couldn't see anything, couldn't see anyone. Hiroshi continued onward, running toward the mist, until a creature made of ice skewered him through the skull, killing him instantly. All the demon slayers froze, wondering what had just happened. Hiroshi had dropped his sword, and, for all intents and purposes, walked to his death where an army of ice soldiers lay. All was silent, and someone started crying. Wailing. Screaming, "I don't want to die, and why the fuck did I become a demon slayer?" Ozaki was stunned. She stood there. What would happen now? She'd been on this mountain for 4 days. 4 fucking days. And things had gone from bad to worse. Soldiers made of ice. Spiders crawling about. And this horrible, foul mist that seemed to make people lose their minds. Shit. What should she do? She turned around. Leave her comrades behind? Only worry about herself? Shit. 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 The screaming and wailing continued. And just in time, the spiders descended. They were tiny things. Little white creatures that came only at night. They began crawling around her, weaving webs in an attempt to restrain her. In a flash, Ozaki cut the threads before it was too late. Others weren't so lucky. 5 demon slayers were quickly bound in webs, then they were dragged away from the tree, screaming for someone, for anyone, to help them. It all happened so fast, and most could hardly get a word out before they were dragged into the mist. Ozaki gritted her teeth and sprang into action, racing to a male slayer that was being pulled away. It was Takuchi, a friend of Murata's. He looked so scared, and Ozaki gave him a reassuring smile. She took a breath, strengthening her muscles. She shot forward like a bullet, intercepting him, and cutting the webs that held him bound. Shaken by the event, Ozaki helped Takuchi stand and walked him back to the tree. For a time, she gazed at the remaining swordsmen. Worn out. Exhausted. Injured. Ozaki considered leaving them behind. But someone stopped her, grabbed her by the arm. She flinched, whirling around, hand gripping the hilt of her sword. It was Murata. Relief flooded her chest. And then, she hugged him. Then she kissed him, pulling him so close she didn't think they'd ever let go. He kissed her back. She savored the feeling of his lips against her own. Shit, she'd been so worried. After a moment, they pulled away, breathless. "I thought you'd gotten lost in the fog," she whispered. Wrapping an arm around her shoulder, he held her close. "I was lucky," he replied grimly. "Only me and Nagakura came back. I lost track of the others. We didn't even go that far." She frowned. "I'm sorry." "No, it was stupid idea to even try." Murata sighed. "How bad is it?" She leaned into his touch. "Bad. The spiders keep coming. The ice creatures keeping coming. And this fog, I'm sure it's doing something to our minds. I mean, Hiroshi just up and walked to his death." Ozaki looked down. "I think we should leave them. On our own, we can survive this." "I know we can." Murata paused and considered her words. He didn't judge her for voicing those thoughts. But he didn't accept it, either. He was more reasonable than her. That's what she loved about him. That and his beautiful hair. "We can't," he said softly. "Not when we have the strength to protect those weaker than us." She remembered Tokyo in that moment, what they'd been through, and how they never chose to flee despite the horror that surrounded them. Ozaki was disappointed in herself for even thinking such thoughts. What would Shinobu do? What would Naruto do? They'd fight and protect those around them. She glanced at Murata. They were stronger now. They weren't the same people as before. Facing the lower moons and training with Naruto and Shinobu had given them an advantage over most demon slayers. Murata looked at those taking shelter under the tree. Most were injured. The spark of hope was gone from their eyes. It was up to them to reignite that hope. I think this is the doing of the 12 Kizuki, Ozaki speculated. Not just the mist, but the ice as well. This ability is much greater than that of an average demon. Agreed. Murata crossed his arms. His uniform was dirty. His body was lined with cuts. But he was fine. Not as injured as those around him. What do? We send a message straight to headquarters. Murata rubbed his chin. We've tried that already. This mist. It's even affecting our crows. No matter what we do, no matter what message we tell them to send, it never reaches a Hashira. Our crows don't come back to us. They're trapped here, just like we are. The mist fools their senses too. But we have to keep trying until we succeed, Ozaki replied. Over the next 2 days, she whistled as loudly as she could. Over the next 2 days, they slept only a few hours. She and Murata held off the ice soldiers as best they could, as well as the spiders. Then whenever she got the chance, she'd whistle and whistle, and whistle. Until he finally came. Sara. Her Kazhigai crow. On the last day, he descended from the mist, squawking loudly. She was overjoyed. He was the first crow to return to them. The first crow to find them in the mist. While many crows circled aimlessly around the mountain, only Sara came. He seemed ill, tired, but he'd still returned. So, she gave him one order. Get to headquarters. We need the Hashira. No matter what the mist shows you, ignore it. Listen only to my voice. Fly straight, and don't stop. Don't stop until you're out in the open. She attached a letter, hastily scribbled on a piece of cloth, and Sara ascended, leaving Mount Natagumo for the last time. As the crow flew, the sight of mist was immense, and countless demon slayers, trapped on the mountain, could only hope for someone capable to come to their aid. An exhausted crow landed at the feet of Master Yabayashiki. Gently, he stooped down and cradled the bird. It was panting, breathing heavily, eyes glazed over, as though it had inhaled something intoxicating. Kaguya stroked its feathers gently. Rest, he whispered. You've done a fine job. Your message has been received. Despite the time of day, he summoned them, the Hashira, the 3 already at headquarters. Shinobu, Jiyu, and Mitsurai. They sat before him, swords beside them. Master. Mitsurai tilted her head. She looked worried. Did something happen? Kaguya tried not to frown, tried not to show his anger. I'm afraid so. What is it, Master? Shinobu implored, concerned. It seems we have been deceived, the leader spoke. There is a situation occurring on Mount Natagumo, and we at headquarters were not sufficiently alerted. But how? Asked Mitsurai. The crows always report everything that happens without fail. I do not know how this occurred, Kaguya stated. Only that the crows were influenced by something, a blood demon art, perhaps. Our smaller bases were alerted first, and lower-ranked demon slayers were sent into a situation that was clearly too much for them to handle. Shinobu frowned. What is the situation, Master? I fear that the 12 Kizuki are at work once again. Kaguya's blind gaze held them in place. A single crow managed to send word from the mountain that reached us. The message was not reassuring. Then send us, Jiya finally spoke. Calm as ever, he was ready to slay demons. That is my intention, my children. He paused, frowning. But do be careful. This situation does not bode well. You are the best of the best indeed. However, do not be reckless. Take care, work together, and be safe. All three Hashiras stood and bowed. There was no hesitation, no protest. Only an iron will that could not be shaken, no matter the assignment. The remaining 6 Hashira would soon be arriving from all over Japan for their meeting. When they came, they would be briefed about the situation and dispatched if the need arose. But for now, 3 was all they could spare. Hopefully, 3 was all they needed. Shinobu breathed out, stared at the butterfly mansion, a longing in her eyes. Sorry, Naruto. It looks like I won't be at headquarters when you arrive. They departed for Mount Natagumo. Day 7, Mount Natagumo, he'd done it. He'd finally done it. 7 days of this. 7 days of spreading his illusory mist across the mountain without rest. 7 days of sitting in one position with his eyes closed, unable to move, unable to protect himself from danger. Wakaraba chewed the inside of his mouth. His blood demon art was more defensive than offensive, and most times, he took an approach that required waiting and watching. Waiting for his enemies to succumb to mirages and lose their minds, giving him an easy kill. This succeeded most of the time, and he quite enjoyed watching his foes grope around like blind men, desperate to escape a mist that moved with them at every turn. So far, everything was going according to plan. The screams and cries of desperate demon slayers, though an annoying sound, indicated his success. Usually, he worked alone. But teaming up with the upper moons, had proven to be very unnerving. They were stationed at an abandoned home on the mountain. This was Rui's base, where he and his fake family lived. Wakaraba held back a chuckle. What a moron, Rui was. Fabricating such a ridiculous circumstance where demons lived together in a foolish attempt at building bonds. Nonsense. Well, not like he cared. Rui might need this garbage to stay sane. But not him. Wakaraba needed no one, wanted no one. Because others were more trouble than they were worth. Which was why he loved solitude, and why he despised working with his fellow 12 Kazuki. From a window, Wakaraba could see Doma. Upper Moon too was lounging on a seat made of ice. In fact, he'd made a treehouse completely out of ice. It was quite intricate, Wakaraba admitted, with beautiful pillars and dynamic statues that seemed to glow, despite the mist surrounding them. It was from here that Doma controlled his ice clones. He'd spread them across the mountain, whereby he terrorized and brutalized countless demon slayers, savoring every moment with a blameless look in his eyes. The more you struggle, the worse it'll be, Doma said cheerfully. Just close your eyes, darling. You will become a part of me. Free from pain. Free from suffering. Free from all the pitiful troubles of life. Soon, you will be at peace. You will be in paradise. Wakaraba tried to ignore him. But he couldn't. Lower 2 opened an eye to see if Doma was playing with his food again. Yeah. He was. Upper Moon 2 had a thing for women. He consumed men as well, no doubt. But he had a type. Generally young, attractive woman, with a distinct body shape, and gentle facial features. Wakaraba didn't understand it. Food was food. No matter the gender. Yet Doma seemed to get an odd thrill from tormenting these women. They were more nutritious, apparently. Body parts were strewn about him. From severed heads, to arms, to legs. He sat on a glistening throne, holding a crying demon slayer in his arms. She begged and pleaded for mercy, squirming against his icy hold. He didn't ease his grip. Doma's childlike smile remained in place, plastered on a face that, Wakaraba admitted, was quite handsome, perfect, in an eerie, uncanny sort of way. The demon slayer started screaming. Doma bit into her shoulder, tearing apart a large chunk of muscle and bone. He did it slowly too, savoring her pain and terror with such perverse bliss. Then he tore off her arms, devouring them whole. By now, her screams had died out, and only horror remained. A defeated kind of horror, for there was no hope, only an anticipation for death. And it wasn't a painless death, either. Doma took his time with her, until she no longer wept. Until she no longer moved. Or breathed. All the while, that innocent smile was on his face, warm blood trailing from the corners of his mouth. Wakaraba thought nothing of it, closing his eyes once more. Why would he? There was nothing to be done. It wasn't like he cared for humans, anyway. Not like he gave a damn about others in general. But then, why was his heart suddenly racing, and his fists slowing clenching? He'd killed scores of people over the years. Why on earth would he feel anything for that woman? Oh, yes. I like her. I'll capture her, maybe take her back to the temple, Doma said happily. It seemed he could share his vision with those ice clones, and he was surveying the mountain for more potential victims. Doma. A new voice echoed from below. Wakaraba cracked a single eye open. It was Rui. He walked through the fog, looking up expectantly. Little Rui, Doma greeted with a grin. Rui's fists clenched at his sides, but he remained still. Hated being called little, it seemed. Wakaraba chuckled. It has been 7 days since we began our assignment, Rui stated. But no Hashira has come. Was this really the best course of action to take? Bold, questioning an upper moon. Rui was either really brave, or really stupid. Luckily for him, Doma was no typical upper moon. Doma leapt down from his treehouse, landing in front of Rui. He placed an icy palm on the smaller demon's head. Relax, Rui, Doma said encouragingly. The Hashira will come. We've killed enough demon slayers. They should have taken notice by now. He smirked. In the meantime, why not live a little? Have some fun. Don't be like that old sad sack, Akaza. Speaking of which, Wakaraba hadn't seen Upper Moon 3 for several days now. Probably out looking for someone strong to fight, as usual. A shuddering in the bushes caught their attention. Both demons turned. Someone emerged, shivering and trembling nervously. Rui's mother. Wakaraba scoffed. What a pathetic sight this family of Rui's was. Even with a glance, he could tell there was no affection between them. No love. Only fear, or disdain. Why are you here? Rui hissed sharply. You're supposed to be out there fighting. Who gave you permission to come see me? The mother fell to her knees. She glanced at both Rui and Doma, who was looking positively delighted to see her. I am sorry, Rui. But there's too many to control. I can't capture so many at once, and there are several demon slayers that are strong. They're interfering with my war. Rui gouged out her eye. The mother screamed. I didn't ask for your excuses, mother. Do what I say. Go. Now. But I'm trying, Rui. Please, dear, consider. He cut her short by shredding her face with his webs. She wailed. Yet she kept trying to plead her case. Wakaraba sighed. Not this again. Why torture them? Why not just make it a quick death in the sun? And not that he cared, or anything like that. Doma tilted his head, intrigued. He stopped Rui. Hold on, little Rui. Upper Moon 2 grinned. Allow me to handle this. I might be a nice guy, but sometimes I gotta put my foot down. As Lord Kokushibo likes to say, subordinates should obey their superiors. He gripped the mother's arm. In an instant, ice engulfed her limb. He froze her from hand to shoulder. Then with a single blow, he shattered the ice, destroying her arm in the process. Her cries were unbearable. She curled up into a ball, shaking uncontrollably. "Now, are you going to listen to Rui, or not?" Doma inquired. His tone had become more sadistic. "If not, I'll do that to you over and over and over again." The mother nodded quickly, sniffling. "Get up, then." She did. Without question. And ran back into the mist. Wakaraba closed his eyes and ignored it all. Instead of getting involved, he focused on maintaining his technique. The influence of Western society was growing. At least, that's how Yuichiro explained it. So many more people wore suits and ties, walking about with briefcases, or riding around in automobiles, as opposed to horses or human-drawn carriages. Even outside of Tokyo, American and British influence was spreading to all of Japan. Naruto found it fascinating. A resident had even stopped him and tried to convert him to a Western religion, one where their savior could apparently walk on water, which he found quite amusing. To be courteous, he'd listened, even engaged with the preacher. Admittedly, it was an interesting belief with an equally interesting message. Perhaps one day, when all was said and done, he'd visit the surrounding nations of this world. Just to get a taste for what each country had to offer culturally. Presently, they were in a small, yet beautiful town. 2 days of traveling had been oddly therapeutic. Yuichiro seemed to have calmed down, but the nervousness around reuniting with his brother still crackled about him like lightning. Naruto had sat him down earlier in the day, and they talked, and he continued to reassure him as he always did, and promised that no matter what happened, even if Muichiro rejected him, that Naruto would continue to love him and treat him as his own brother. That always helped calm him down. Naruto also rented 2 rooms for himself and Yuichiro, as well as for the 2 demon slayers aiding them in the travel. They almost didn't accept his token of kindness, stating that renting a room for them was too much. However, Naruto didn't mind. He never advertised it much, but in truth, he was pretty rich. He owned a clinic, sold medicine, helped local hospitals with difficult cases, and had at one point traveled around Japan, treating those he could and was paid handsomely for it. So, of course he was well off. He promised Asami and Kei that it was no trouble for him. They accepted, albeit reluctantly. The night was young when they decided to head into town. There was a festival occurring, and an amusement park was located in the center of the small city. Another consequence of Western influence, Yuichiro explained, was the creation of various amusement parks across Japan. Some were even in Tokyo, but Naruto had never taken out time to visit one. Thankfully, they had time for a change. So they headed there, swamped by a throng of curious people, happy children, and various eager patrons. "Look at that one!" Naruto marveled, wrapping an arm around Yuichiro's shoulder. He pointed at the towering Ferris wheel. He leaned close. "You and Asami should ride it." Yuichiro cheeks tinted red. "Why Asami?" he whispered. He was acutely aware of the 2 demon slayers walking behind them, keeping watch. "She seems very fond of you, always glancing your way," Naruto explained, grinning. "She tries to be subtle about it, but she can't fool me." "That's because it's her job to protect us," Yuichiro argued. "Why wouldn't she look at us?" "Not us. You, specifically." Naruto chuckled and bought them some ice cream. "You guys have been talking a lot these past 2 days. And she's 16, just 2 years older than you. It could work." Yuichiro elbowed Naruto away, licking his ice cream. When they arrived at the amusement park, Naruto paused. "How about we split up, cover more ground, you know?" Asami and Kei arched a brow. "We really shouldn't," said Asami. "It's our job to protect you too." Naruto grinned. "Then I'll take Kei, and you go with Yuichiro." Asami hesitated. "I I don't know, sure you do. He wasted no time, leading Kay away. Luckily, even being deaf, she could understand social cues, to a greater degree than most, and followed him through the growing crowd of people. Yuichiro and Asami just stood there, side by side, watching with stunned looks in their eyes. In the end, Naruto gave Kay the slip as well. He left a clone in his place. And now, alone, he pulled out a scroll and unsealed Susumaru. She leapt up and stretched her limbs. Her eyes brightened when she saw him, a grin spreading across her face. "Hey," she said happily. He smiled. "Hey." Susumaru twirled around, gorgeous Haori fluttering in the wind. He really loved that Haori. It made her look so elegant, so radiant. She surveyed the amusement park with glee. "You want to try the rides?" he inquired. "Hell yeah." She took him by the hand and dragged him to the nearest mechanical contraption. Naruto relaxed and let her lead him. Her hand was soft, gentle. Slightly cold, but it fit perfectly in his own. Over the next few hours, they played various games, rode multiple rides, and goofed off. Even pulled some harmless pranks on each other. At one point, they'd spotted both Asami and Yuichiro on the Ferris wheel, at the very top of the metal structure. Kay was still with his clone, still clueless about his doppelganger. Later, Naruto and Susumaru found themselves at a lake. It was large, beautiful, tinted silver by the starlit sky. The moon shined down from above, glinting off the water's cool surface. They sat at a pier, watched stray fishing boats in the distance. Susumaru took off her sandals and dipped her toes in the lake. Naruto sat beside her, legs crossed, eyes closed. She glanced at him curiously, no doubt observing the orange color around his eyes. He'd entered Sage mode, not just for the hell of it, but to keep his skills up to par. With the majority of his chakra being siphoned away, it took much greater control to mix natural energy with his own innate energy, requiring a precision that was almost inhuman. Still, he'd managed to do it, and could draw just the right ratio of nature energy to merge with his lower reserves. He opened his eyes. Found her staring. Susumaru's head was tilted, and she leaned in. "Whoa," she whispered. "Your eyes are really beautiful." The demon paused. And not that they weren't beautiful before, but this time, it's so different. I like it. Another technique. Thank you, and yes, it's another one of my techniques. Sage mode, to be exact. Neat. She splashed her feet in the water. The silence was nice, broken only by the sound of rowing fishermen. Susumaru waved to them whenever they floated past. They eagerly returned her greeting. "So. I've decided," Susumaru announced. Naruto arched a brow. "Decided what?" She crossed her arms firmly. "That I'm going with you back to your home country." He turned to her, curious. "Wait, where's this coming from?" She shrugged, then suddenly grew shy. "And nowhere, really. Yuichiro told me that you'd be going back home someday. And I've decided to go with you, wherever your country is." She paused. "By the way, where is your country?" Susumaru blushed with embarrassment, rubbing at her hair. "I've been trying to figure it out, checking out maps, history books, anything that might give me a hint. Your clothes are certainly different than ours, that's for sure." Naruto considered her words, then laughed softly. "It's in another dimension," he revealed nonchalantly. She froze, wanted to speak, grew quiet. Then asked, "Are you serious?" He smiled. "Completely serious. I'm not from this world, Su. My home country is in a, to put it bluntly, different universe." There was a pause. "Oh," she exclaimed, taking the news rather easily. "That's what you meant when you told me it was far away." He laughed even more. "You're not surprised by this?" She shrugged. Why would I be? I've seen you make clones, control the wind, create bombs out of paper, and manifest orbs of energy, despite being human. I can't see how this news is any different, any more bizarre. He wanted to hug her in that moment. Susumaru's personality never ceased to amuse and brighten his day. She was the perfect distraction from the sadness he felt at Tsunade, Kakashi, and Gaara's deaths. Well, you don't have to worry about coming to my world, Su. Naruto looked ahead, watching the beautiful lake. I won't leave you, or Yuichiro, or Kimiko. Not ever, he promised. Susumaru's eyes widened. Wait, does that mean you'll stay here? He wanted to answer, wanted to tell her his plans for the future in detail. But he paused mid-sentence, the memories of his clone reaching his mind. It had dissipated, bringing news that had alarmed both Asami and Kei. Naruto stood up. Susumaru did as well. What's going on? He turned to her. A change of plans, possibly. Come on. But what about the demon slayers seeing me? She asked. They're still not aware of my presence, right? Yeah. Good point. So, Naruto sealed her in the scroll and returned to the inn he'd rented for their group. He found Asami, Kei, and Yuichiro in one of the rooms. A Kazhigai crow was present, squawking the news over and over, panicking, flapping its wings restlessly. From what Naruto's clone had gathered before dispersing, something was happening on a place called Mount Natagumo. An incident involving nearly 100 demon slayers. It was also speculated that the 12 Kizuki were at work once again. Naruto frowned at the thought. 3 of them had been annoying to deal with. Now more, possibly stronger demons, were involved. When he entered, Kei's features relaxed. She looked relieved. Where did you go? Asami asked. Kei lost sight of you, says you just up and disappeared. Naruto rubbed his hair. Sorry. Had to use the restroom. Asami wasn't convinced by his answer, but she didn't dwell on it for long. Instead, she took note of his eyes. Did you put makeup on, or something? He was still in sage mode, still bearing the characteristic rings around his eyelids. She shook her head. Anyway, that's not important right now. She briefed them one more time. I think we might have to cut this trip short, Asami concluded, conflicted. Our fellow demon slayers are out there fighting and dying. They need our help. She glanced at Yuichiro and hesitated. But this mission is just as important. It's from the master himself. Damn. The tall slayer sighed. I don't want to just leave you two here, either. Kei signed to Asami, and she nodded. Give us a minute to discuss this first, she requested as both demon slayers left the room. Naruto locked their door and unsealed Susumaru. He also explained the situation to her, explained his reason for them leaving the pier. At that, she closed her eyes. Focused. It's faint, but I think I can feel something. I can feel the presence of a number of demons. She shivered. And they're strong. Stronger than the ones we faced in Tokyo. Naruto nodded. He thought of Tanjiro, Nezuko, Ozaki, Murata, Kaneo, and Shinobu, even Uzui and his wives. Especially now that the crow had confirmed the involvement of the Hashira. You have to go help them, Naruto. Yuichiro spoke quietly. He'd been sitting on the bed, looking afraid. Not for his safety. But perhaps, for another's. Susumaru caught on quickly. You're worried about your brother, aren't you? She asked softly. She sat down next to him, put an arm around him. Yeah. Yuichiro whispered. He's a Hashira. He might be on that mountain right now, fighting those monsters. If what we saw in Tokyo were the weaker ones, I can't imagine what those demon slayers are facing. He looked up, looked into Naruto's eyes. You have to go. Please. I know it's not your responsibility. I know you're not obligated to help. But for the off chance that my brother is caught up in this mess, I want you to be there as well. To protect him. Naruto's gaze was gentle. He knelt on one knee in front of Yuichiro. If you want me to go, then I'll go. No questions asked. Yuichiro smiled with relief. Thank you. Naruto glanced at Susumaru. She smirked. Don't even ask. You know I'm coming with you. He chuckled, standing up. Here. He pulled out the tanto Tenjin had given him and placed it in Yuichiro's palm. You won't need this, but I think you might feel more at ease holding it. Give it back to me when I return. Yuichiro accepted it without question, gripping the blade. Sure. Naruto also created a clone, one that would look after Yuichiro when he was gone. That way, Asami and Kei wouldn't be able to tell he wasn't present. How far away is Mount Natagumo, and where is it located? Naruto asked. As if on cue, the Kashigi crow, which had been perched on one of the windows, squawked. About 55 kilometers, north-northeast. Naruto chuckled. Thanks, little guy. The crow reveled in his praise. Yuichiro stood up. What about Asami and Kei? I trust they'll complete their mission and bring you to headquarters. But even if they don't, my clone should be enough to keep you and Kimiko safe. Convinced, the younger teen nodded. Susumaru punched her fist into her palm, rising to her feet. What are we waiting for? Let's go kick some ass. Of course, Naruto replied, grinning. He was still in Sage mode, still had that monumental boost of power. He'd be faster than Susumaru by a mile. So, he wasted no time. He scooped her up in his arms, shocking her completely. She blushed deeply, but didn't resist, relaxing as he held her. Sorry. It'll be faster this way. I hope you don't mind. And no, it's fine, she whispered. Before he left, Naruto tossed Yuichiro his bag of coins and money. Pay the innkeeper, okay. Yuichiro looked confused. For what? We already paid for the night. For this. Naruto was gone then, having leapt out the window. In flash, he sped away, moving so fast that the shockwave cracking every piece of glass in the building. I can be such a moron sometimes. His clone sighed, surveying the damage with a frown. Yuichiro smiled brightly. You got that right. Ahead, Susumaru held on for dear life. The world was nothing but a blur. In seconds, they were already out of town, on a dirt road, and in a forest. The trees swayed and stretched, and she could see nothing but vague colors, splashes of green grass and gray clouds, and a big, bright moon. It was amazing, the fact that they hadn't crashed into anything yet, considering their speed. Then she looked up, saw his face. That handsome face. He looked incredible, his golden locks fluttering in the mighty wind. Amber eyes, indicative of his technique, his sage mode, glinted brightly, and he avoided every obstacle that came his way, twisting and turning, jumping from tree to tree, shattering branches as he leapt high into the night sky. At one point, he jumped so high that she could see the world for miles around, could taste the icy air of the lower atmosphere. She couldn't help it, giggling and holding him and snuggling into his chest. God, she fucking loved him. In caring arms. Something was coming. Something powerful. And fast. Very fast. Akaza stood up. Chills crawled down his body. Tremors raced from his toes to the hairs on his head. What is that? It had just punched a hole through the mist, and it wasn't stopping, thundering into the forest of Mount Natagumo. He grinned madly. This feeling. This battle spirit. It was unreal. Unfathomable. Was it a demon slayer? The questions raced incessantly through his mind, until he decided to meet this beast head-on. Finally, after days of fighting weaklings, after days of being bored out of his mind, sitting atop trees, watching foolish, pathetic demon slayers groping around in the mist, he might actually find a worthy opponent. Maybe it was a Hashira. His grin widened. Those always managed to entertain him. Veins bulged along Akaza's body. Powerful muscles came alive. Every cell in his body screamed for blood. For battle. So he ran, faster than he'd ever ran before, destroying the tree behind him, reducing it to mere shrapnel. A sonic boom crackled and echoed down the mountain. Akaza broke into a sprint, heart pounding, eyes focused, senses ablaze. The world became a tunnel. He saw nothing but his target, felt nothing but his target. Their battle spirit was so palpable, he could almost taste it. Left. His target had veered left. Akaza did the same, cutting across a field and passing what he thought was a man wearing a boar's head. He ignored that minor detail and continued onward, fists clenching as he ran. Right. The beast turned right this time. Akaza followed suit, growing more and more excited. Every technique, every skill, honed through years of battle, through years of violence, were at his fingertips just waiting to be unleashed. There. Akaza burst into another clearing. And he saw his opponent. A man. A man with blonde hair. Golden irises. Orange rings around his eyes. Whiskered cheeks. It was him. It was one of the humans Muzan had shown them. He was here, headed straight for Akaza, and he wasn't stopping. Akaza laughed, threw his head back and laughed, rearing his fist for the first blow. Air type. The blonde man finally noticed him. He was carrying someone, too. He locked eyes with Akaza, gaze narrowing to slits. The man lowered his arm. Time slowed down. Akaza saw something forming in his palm. It started out small, then grew, spinning wildly, glowing radiantly in the mist-covered forest. The sphere grew, and smaller balls of energy surrounded it, rotating around it like moons orbiting a planet. In a blink, both he and Akaza crossed the clearing, on a collision course with one another. Yet neither of them relented. Neither of them changed paths. Neither of them flinched. Inches apart, Akaza threw the first punch. And missed. Or better yet, his attack was dodged. Effortlessly. Then, the blonde thrust that sphere into his chest. Planetary rays none. It was whispered so softly, Akaza thought he imagined it. But the pain itself was far from imaginary. Akaza howled. The ball of energy blasted him away with such force that he lost consciousness for a moment, awaking only to pure, unbridled agony. He was thrown across Mount Naruto. Akaza crashed through dozens of trees, felling each one as he flew, spreading wooden shrapnel and shredding lumbering trunks. Then he struck the ground and carved a trench into the earth, kicking up a cloud of dust so thick, it overpowered the mist around him. The sphere grew in size and drilled, engulfing his upper body. Akaza panicked, felt fear for the first time in years. In that moment, he knew. If this attack managed to damage his neck, if it managed to destroy his head, it might spell death for him. Because this energy, this blue sphere, was mixed with something similar to sunlight, something similar to what powered a demon slayer's Nichiren blade. So, tossed about like a doll, Akaza took no chances. He used his free arm and tore his own head off. Without hesitation, he threw his very cranium aside and let the sphere of energy grow until it engulfed what was left of his body. End.